Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rhodes, I believe you used to work alongside former acting head Ken
Kasprzyzyn, sir.
Kasprzyzyn, thank you very much, at Minneapolis, St. Paul. Mr. Kasprzyzyn has stated before that thousands of airport workers who are only subject to random checks are the single greatest threat to aviation security. Now TSA employees are regularly rooted out for being caught rummaging through baggage or for inappropriate behavior, which obviously is good that we're catching them. But my concern is by the repeated reports that there are only 3 U.S. airports that currently require employee security checks: Atlanta, Miami, and Orlando. And in Atlanta, they had a major gun running operation busted in 2014. And additionally, we have reports that there are some 73 employees at about 40 airports who potentially have terrorist ties. At some point, is the TSA causing more insecurity than it solves? I mean, frankly, as a very frequent traveler, it gives me some concern that the screening process may identify potential terrorists, yet they continue to work there.
So let me try to answer that question, sir. I believe if the TSA was mandated to screen every employee at airports, it candidly would require much more resources. I'm unqualified to professionally comment on how much those resources will require, but what I can say is at the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport, there are I believe over 10,000 people that work at that airport. Now, obviously, some of them come during various times of the day and in various shifts, and certainly the insider threat has received a new focus based upon world events. What I will say is we are resourced in FTE based upon our mission, our baggage and passenger screening. Again, I'm unqualified to comment whether we should also receive resources in that, but I can say that's not our specific focus.
Let me put it this way. Obviously, we're talking about just some basic screening, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Every staff member that works here goes through screening to get into an office here. And in terms of, being able to do their job, if you know you have to go through a screening process, you show up early.
Yes,
is that unreasonable?
No, that's not unreasonable, sir. I think what our administrator has done, rightfully so, his focus is reducing some of those access points at those airports. And if you're aware of what's called SIDA badges and various access points, those are available to some employees. However, again, I don't have any data to suggest or talk intelligently with respects to how many access points. I can say at Minneapolis, the number of access points have been reduced, and we continue to reduce them.
Well, just think about it for a moment, that if we know the TSA thinks there's 73 potential employees potentially with terrorist ties, that's who they've identified, that there might be potentially others, and that we're not screening them, it doesn't give you a high comfort level.
I don't disagree with you, sir.
Mr. Brainerd, I'd like to follow up on Mr. Duncan's questions regarding wasteful spending, in which you all described expenditures such as $330,000 spent on an absentee regional director in Minneapolis, St. Paul, a $12 million project that was over budget by 3 times its original amount. And I could almost ask for a hearing just on project overruns. $336,000 on an app that you, Mr. Brainerd, described as being as effective as an Ouija board and accomplishing its task. I'm sure the more we continue to hear from other employees at different airports, we're going to continue to hear similar stories to that effect. You might be aware that last April, the TSA Aviation Security Advisory Committee released a report concluding that they could not afford full employee screening and that it would not reduce the risk of overall public safety, despite numerous voices from inside the TSA speaking out to warn of insider threats. Do you believe this illustrates where their priorities lie when you look at this other spending?
Thank you for the question, sir. Thank you for the question, sir. When it comes to spending, another example to give you where they could have put the money into toward making something like that happen. When they did the directed reassignments, I went from Iowa to Maine. I had received near perfect evaluation. There was no vacancy in Maine. The federal security director in Maine received a perfect evaluation. He was being sent to Wisconsin. Between the two of us, you're talking in excess of $250,000 just for the move that was earmarked for those two federal security directors. The FSD in Jacksonville got sent to Iowa. I was there. There was no vacancy. There was no reason to send it. All of these federal security directors were performing in excess of standards. No federal security director had more experience. The main operation, which was a wonderful operation, was smaller and less complex than what I had. The FSD in Wisconsin to Arkansas, the FSD in North Carolina to Los Angeles, his spouse from Los Angeles to Washington, the FSD in West Virginia to San Diego. There was no reason for these moves. I don't know what the price tag is on all those moves, but we could have certainly used that funding more appropriately.
Well, and that just brings me back to the point I was trying to make with Mr. Rhodes, that you're spending all this money, and we know that not every TSA employee is up to standard. I mean, potentially 73 may have terrorist ties, but we're spending all this money and we're not investing in the security apparatus that we need to make sure, absolutely, positively certain, that we have the very best people on the job and that we're protecting our airports. I saw you shaking your head, Dr. Livingston. I presume you may have a comment.
Sir, in full disclosure, just like my partner here to my left, we're from the same area as well. I'm from Prattville. I know you're from Clanton, so.
Well, actually, I'm from Hackleburg, Alabama, and I live in Hoover. And by the way, today is the 5-year anniversary of the tornadoes that went through Alabama with such devastating impact.
Wow, okay.
Thank the gentleman. Did you want to finish your response, Mr. Livingston?
Yes, sir. So to answer your question, sir, there needs to be greater oversight. I was part of the office that identified that original 73. We didn't have access to the list. I was actually part of the team that decided we needed to notify NCTC that we needed to generate a letter back to them to say we didn't have access to that database. I've also been part of the secure flight team that identified we needed to do a better job of screening. So there is an opportunity there to do better screening, and there's also a better opportunity for TSA to do better monetary discipline. I identified the $10 million excess spent on a watch floor. So yes, sir, there is an opportunity to be more prudent with the taxpayers' money. Anytime you see an example of waste, fraud, and abuse, we've got to do better. Yes, sir.
I thank the chairman. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman.